Greetings, I'm Zachary Hepner. I'm pleased to share this Dvar Torah with you for Parashat Vayera. The Greek historian Xenophon recounts in his Symposium that one day Socrates was out walking with some friends when they were approached by Callias, a wealthy Athenian. "I'm about to give dinner party, and I think my entertainment would shine much brighter if my dining room were graced with the presence of men like you, whose souls have been purified." At first, Socrates thought Callias was mocking his disheveled appearance, but the great man insisted. They thanked him for the invitation without promising they would go, but when they saw his disappointment, they agreed to attend. They spent the evening at his home, eating, drinking, and talking in one of the most characteristic social fixtures of the classical world in the Symposium. In ancient Greece, the Symposium was part of a banquet that took place after the meal, when drinking for pleasure was accompanied by music, dancing, recitals, or conversations. Its origins dating possibly earlier than 900 BCE, and by 400 BCE, it had become integrated into dinner parties, not only to the upper class, but to what I would call the well-to-do middle class. In 1957, Siegfried Stein composed his groundbreaking paper titled "The Influence of Symposia Literature on the Literary Form of the Pesach Haggadah" in the Journal of Jewish Studies, 1957. My family did have a connection to Stein. My Avi Mori and my late Opa Gedalia Max Hepner, alav hashalom, used to daven at Stein's home for the Rosh Hashanah davening, along with the late Rabbi Arthur Marmerstein, allegedly because his home services had less piyutim and was therefore a shorter service. In Stein's paper, he demonstrates that at some time in antiquity, possibly after the destruction of the Second Temple, Chazal used the pagan structure of the Symposium and superimposiumed it to the mitzvah of V'higata levincha, creating sacred structures surrounding the already commanded mitzvot of Pesach night. That is the very brief history of the Haggadah Seder. Much has been written on this topic following the 1957 seminal paper, linking the themes of the Symposium and connecting the dots, how Chazal turned all the mores into an educational opportunity in perpetuity. There are so many connections that someone with even an average background in Talmud and antiquity can uncover new connections and meanings between the Haggadah and the Symposium. In Parashat Vayera, when Lot serves his angelic guests unleavened bread, matzat afa vayochelu, Rashi tersely says, quote, umatzat afa Pesach haya. It was Passover. This is indeed a peculiar Rashi. There's the unleavened bread, and therefore it must have been Passover night. The problem is that Rashi is not citing the Midrash on that verse, but rather interpolating a different Midrash Rabbah from earlier on in the Parsha and a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, when Abraham tells Sarah to knead and make cakes. The Midrash Rabbah says, quote, Lushi va'asiugot hada amart pros hapesach hava. Pros has a few meanings. The Midrash could be saying that it was the pros afternoon of Passover Eve. This makes sense since it was kechom hayom, in the heat of the day. Pros can also mean it was the pros, broken part of Passover. In other words, the broken cakes, namely the matzot that are broken in half during the Passover Seder. Either way, Rashi strangely chose that Midrash to explain a later verse about Lot's choice of menu for his guests. A much simpler explanation would be that Lot made a quick meal for his guests, because preparing bread takes much longer than preparing a pancake. In 2003, my Avi Mori published the connection between Pesach and Lot's Passover, titled Lot's Exodus from Sodom Foreshadows the Exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and the Passover Laws, published in Zeitschrift, or ZAR. in 2003. It is also cited by Rabbi David Silber in a footnote in his Haggadah. Also in 2014, Rav Yoel ben Nun wrote about the connections. Here are some connections between the Lot narrative and the Pesach Mitzrayim narrative. And Lot went out at the entrance, and in Pesach Mitzrayim, go out from the entrance. The entrance to the houses, and in Pesach Mitzrayim, God will pass over the entrance and will not allow the destroyer to come into your home. And we will destroy this place. God will send us to destroy it. And in Pesach Mitzrayim, I will smite the firstborn. When I smite the land of Egypt, God smote all the firstborn. Get up, get out. God is going to destroy the city. And in Pesach Mitzrayim, get up, get out from among my nation. And he lingered, so they brought him out. And in Pesach Mitzrayim, they could not linger. God rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah. And in Pesach Mitzrayim, God rained hail on the land of Egypt. There are many, many more connections. To quote Rav Yoel ben Nun, quote, the many parallels between the overturning of Sodom and the plagues on Egypt practically shout out Pesach, end quote. And here yet we have another connection. Vayivtzar bam me'od vayasur elav vayavol beto. And he invited them, and they said, nay, we will abide in the broad place all night. And he urged them greatly. And they turned to him, and they entered into his house. He made them a feast, and he baked them unleavened bread, and they ate. Lot was acting just like the wealthy Athenian Callias. The angels had refused, just as Socrates had refused. Callias, as did Lot, insisted on the invitation. The initial interactions between Callias and Socrates was not just a human interest story, but part of the Symposium, the invitations and expectations that the guests will accept the invitation. Rashi was well aware that a medrash in one place could have a ripple effect on interactions and interpretations in another. To paraphrase Lewis Carroll, why sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before the Haggadah. It's been 3,000 years since the first known reference to the Symposium. The Greeks were all the rave, and today this is what we call history, while the Haggadah is the example par excellence of what we call today a living Judaism, thanks to Chazal, who, following the tragedy of losing the temple, didn't miss a heartbeat to set in motion a very successful educational opportunity. And to make matters curiouser and curiouser, cried Alice, the most widely mitzvot observed by Jews worldwide are the Haggadah and the Hanukkah candles. The Haggadah, thanks to the Greeks. The Hanukkah candles, thanks, but no thanks to the Greeks. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.